Welcome back to the Athletes Podcast, episode 122, featuring Jordan Syatt. We've had this feature booked for over a year, Jordan.
Yeah.
Craziness. And we still couldn't manage to get the lighting right for the YouTube.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, due to some circumstances, the producer could not make it for that podcast. He was taking a short vacation in Montreal, but
I give you one vacay a year, and this is what happens, eh?
I took it. I was like, yeah, this weekend.
It's not like he's, one of our biggest episodes to date.
Yeah.
Nearly 1 million followers.
Yeah.
Pretty substantial inner circle. Pretty legitimate human being.
Yeah.
I don't know. You listened to the episode after.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts?
A couple, actually. Like you said, he's the way he is in his videos that you showed me through his Instagram, his clips, is the way he was talking even in the podcast. And he even mentioned in the podcast, he doesn't change for anyone. He brings up his swearing in his videos and how he talks about, when he loses a follower, he also gains one, which I thought was pretty interesting. I don't know about your opinion. I do like watching maybe fitness videos or ones where the person doesn't seem like they're reading off a script, right? They're being real. Like, you resonate with those more. You kind of, even when we discuss with Mind Pump, it's just, I want to listen to what they have to say, and it resonates more with me. And then, something that I kind of get hooked on.
100%. Well, and that's what people want, is engaging content that is going to provide you with not only education, but entertainment.
Yeah. And if you guys haven't seen Jordan Syatt's clips on Instagram, they're funny because you do have those fitness influencers who tell you what to do and what not to do, and they're just recording themselves on a camera saying it, maybe like, looking on Google about what they read in the dictionary, trying to sound smart. He says it, and then he puts on a wig and a cigarette, and he's like, oh, don't do burpees, and he shows, he just emphasizes what burpees. He's hilarious with it, and it makes sense. And it's just, you watch one, you watch two, you're learning a lot half an hour later after laughing your ass off and learning about what to do and what not to do in the fitness industry. It's hilarious. It's amazing.
That's why this was such an important episode for me. It's someone who I've looked up to for a long time. Obviously, his connection to Gary Vaynerchuk. I've seen a bunch of his content. He talks about what it's like working with an individual like Gary, who is very motivated, very, very eager to do as much as they possibly can, which is not necessarily conducive for good results in the long run from a fitness and health standpoint.
Yeah.
Right? He's talking about burnout and how to manage that and how important sleep is. There was probably hours worth of questions and content that we could have created with Jordan. We only had an hour, and like we already mentioned, you weren't here. So you know what? We got in a really good conversation. One of the other things that was talking about that you and I have both been doing recently is traveling, how difficult that is, staying on track. You talked about kind of that 70% rule that he touched on. Yeah,
that is actually a great way to think about it, because I do think, and I've gone through it before, where, you go on that fitness kick or that health kick, both at the same time, where you're spending your entire day planning your meals, planning your workouts, and it's great. But if that's consuming a lot of your day, it's not consistent, because then, for me, I did that just before getting a job, and I get a full-time job, and that time just isn't there anymore. And then including so when he talked about even doing the right thing for your body 70% of the time, you'll see results in the longer run, but it's more consistent. And I think it's a more sustainable way to approach life.
I think consistency and effort are what lead to success in life. And I think it's like health, like fitness. You're not going to see the results instantly. You're not going to get 1 million downloads on your first podcast. Yeah. You might get 1 million on your 122nd when you feature Jordan Syatt.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, you're going to learn a ton during the process. You're going to figure out what works for you, what doesn't work for you. Maybe talk about what's working for you. For me, being able to find a gym wherever I'm traveling has been difficult, but so worth it. It's such a pain in the ass trying to find a gym to do a 1-day drop-in. They're going to charge you $25. You're like, man, this is a month at whatever other Good Life that you could be at, and which is frustrating. I should probably just have a Good Life membership. But
I have to admit, because I purchased the Good Life, I really like the fact that even where we are in Toronto, if I put in Good Life Fitness, I want to go to one, I think there's over 10 within 5 to 10 kilometers of this location. And like you said, that's the good thing, is being able to work out wherever, whenever. Even my job, their building has a good life, so I can always stop there after work. It's incredible.
Yeah, and I think the main thing is keeping the momentum that you've built.
Yeah.
And I think he's talked about that. He started his website at the age of 21. It's constantly iterating, making minor adjustments towards what your end goal is. For him, training as many clients as he possibly could, providing his knowledge, wisdom to as many individuals as possible. And I think the inner circle is what he created. That's what we're trying to do with this platform.
Yeah.
To me, I just loved it. I loved his approach to the conversation and how he just approaches life in general.
Yeah. And what blew my mind in the podcast, one thing, if I had to say one thing, was his deadlift record. And I'm not going to give the record away right now, but you picture what a 135-pound man can deadlift, and it's probably higher. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I mean, definitely higher than average.
Oof.
Pretty phenomenal feat, to
he
say
said
the least.
only 15 people could do what he did.
Yeah.
So that's pretty crazy. More people have climbed Mount Everest. So
there you go. That's a pretty phenomenal feat. What else is going on in sports right now? The Leafs got lucky, found a win last night.
I've probably said this every year because, obviously last year being up 3-1 with Montreal, you get confident, but I have not seen Matthews and Marner, quite frankly, that team, but like those two play with the hunger that they did yesterday. You can tell that entire team wants to get out of this first round, but even with their penalty kill, they were incredible. Like the entire game, 60 minutes, that Leaf team was unbelievable. From the goalies to the defensemen to the forwards, it was a perfect game, and I can't wait till we win Game 2, Game 3, and Game 4.
Wow. I don't know where to go from there. Again, Jordan's optimistic. We know this.
Yeah, and we could even talk about how we thought the LA Kings were going to have a tough time against the Oilers. You can say hey, the LA Kings won yesterday. People thought they might have gotten swept, but they're putting up a fight too, so...
I think the NHL is balanced this year more than ever. The East Coast had something crazy like 7 or 8 teams that all had above 100 points, which is ridiculous on its own.
Yeah.
So every team...
Yeah, it was 7 out of the 8 or something. It was crazy.
Ridiculous. Like Tampa, Toronto is a crazy matchup. Boston, Carolina is crazy.
Like, what's your take on that? Do you like the way the playoff settings are, or would you rather go back to have 1 versus 8 Eastern Conference and Western Conference?
I think there's a bunch of people smarter than me that make those decisions, if I'm being quite frank. I don't know. There's so many different ways to do it. What do I know? I grew up in the 1v8 format, East, West Coast. Detroit was in a different division. They were playing against Vancouver all the time. So I don't know.
For me, the part that's tough is the fact that the Leafs, again, as an example, had the best record that they've ever had. And their reward for it is playing the 2-time back-to-back Stanley Cup champions.
Got to beat the best to be the best.
That's true. You know what? Yeah.
Might as well get rid of him early, right?
Then again, yeah, we played Montreal last year. We think it's a breeze, and it's not. So, yeah. That's what I like about the NHL a lot over most sports is that especially, I want to say basketball, when you have that 1 versus 8 seed, I don't know how often that 8th seed comes out. And
not often.
That's what I mean. And then in NHL, there was a year where the LA Kings were the 8th seed and they win the Stanley Cup. It's just a very unpredictable sport. You
know who did just win a 8v1 seed is the Vancouver Giants against the Everett Silvertips.
There we
Fun
go.
fact for you, just clipped in. Without further ado, Jordan, let's get to Jordan Syatt's episode on the
He's
Athletes
got a great
Podcast.
first name.
I figured you'd say that. Episode 122 featuring Jordan Syatt from SyattFitness and the Inner Circle. Here we go. I think the coolest way to start this conversation off would just be for you to share a bit about your story, what got you into fitness. Obviously, your brand is built around and your name, Jordan Syatt Fitness. But maybe for those who don't know who you are, what you do, I'd love for you to give maybe your 60-second elevator pitch as to who you are, what got you into the fitness space, and why you are giving back so much.
Yeah, so I got into it from wrestling. So I actually started wrestling when I was 8 years old. So I'm short, bald Jewish guy, coming from a very short sport family. My mom wanted my brother and I to be able to defend ourselves. So she walked in the living room one day when I was lying on the couch and she was like, I'm going to put you and your brother in wrestling. And at that point in my life, the only wrestling that I knew was WWF style wrestling. So I remember I looked at her and I was like, you want me to hit someone with a chair? And she was like, no, you idiot, like Olympic style wrestling, which I had no idea what that was. So she put us into it and I fell in love with it. Like I was just obsessed with wrestling. It's all I thought about. It's all I cared about. And so I started when I was 8 years old. So by the time I got to high school, I was good from a technical perspective and I was good from an endurance perspective. And I actually ended up making varsity. I beat a junior out for the varsity spot, but because I was mostly going up against like 16, 17, 18-year-old kids when I was 14 and 15, my strength wasn't where it needed to be. So I applied to a gym a couple towns over from me. And I was like, I'll take the trash out. I'll clean the floors. Like, let me just come and learn from you. And I was very fortunate because they took me under their wing and they let me come work for them. And they were also very, very, very science-based. And that was it. As soon as I started working for them and interning and coaching for them, I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I've been in the gym since I was 14 and I've loved it.
And wrestlers are some of the best or most in shape individuals that I've ever seen across the board. So obviously that started you off on the right foot, but maybe what led to you loving specifically wrestling? I'm sure that there was the fitness aspect. There was the ability to compete not only against yourself, but others. And then like you moved on to now educating huge masses of individuals. And it's not just wrestlers, sorry, it's not just athletes, but maybe what was your pivotal moment that you realized, okay, how can I help not only just myself, but so many more other people?
Yeah. So I started my website in July of 2011. So over 10 years ago now. And when I started my website, I was a competitive powerlifter at that time. I decided I wasn't going to wrestle in college because I didn't want to be cutting weight anymore. So I switched to powerlifting and I still ended up cutting weight, but way less than I did for wrestling and on a way less frequent basis. And in 2011, online coaching wasn't really a thing. And I didn't even know that making an online business was possible. The people that I looked up to in the industry were people like Eric Cressy and Dan John and Pavel Tsatsouline and Tony Gentilcore and Mike Robertson, a lot of guys that people don't really even know of at this point. They were all writing long form articles on their websites. And that's what I spent the vast majority of my time reading. So I was like, you know what, like I'm competing in powerlifting. I want to make my own website so I can help people. And that's what I did. So I made a website. I was 21 years old in my college dorm room. And I didn't know I was going to make a business from it. I was just like, I want to help people like these guys are doing. And it took a while, it took a couple of years, but it started to build up traction and people started to read it and people would find my articles on Google. And I just remember I made my first business email and I was in college and I just wished that people would email me. I just wanted them to say like, hey, I read this article. Can you help me? I was just refreshing that email over and over and over again, wanting people to ask me for help. And then after a couple of years, I finally started getting people emailing me and started getting people to read my website. And it was just the best feeling in the world. More than making it a business has ever felt good. It was just really cool to know that people were reading my content and enjoying it. And that feeling was very addicting for me.
I love it. And you bring up an interesting point because you started at 21 in college. I know you've worked hands-on with Gary V for a while now. He doesn't and is not necessarily a fan of college. Did you guys disagree on that? Is that something that you were like, hey, I can learn from this, apply the knowledge that I'm obtaining, and then move forward afterwards? Like, I'm curious where you guys sit on that.
No, so it's interesting. So Gary isn't anti-college at all. He's anti people thinking college is a requirement, like you need college to succeed. And for whatever it's worth, like I hated college. I hated every minute of it. The thing that kept me going was my business. The literal only reason that I stayed in college was because, I don't have a relationship with my father very much at all. I haven't spoken to him in like 15 years, but my mom and I are super close. And it was important for our relationship for me to stay in college because she's very big on higher education and she always wanted me to get a degree. And I wasn't willing to potentially risk hurting our relationship by dropping out. So she was the reason I stayed in, not because I liked it and not because I learned a lot. Like I did not learn a lot in college. I fucking hated it, but it did give me an opportunity to really work on my business. It's so funny. Like if you're in college to be a doctor or an engineer, then you don't really have much extra time. But otherwise, you have a fuck ton of extra time in college. You have so much free time. I would like a lot of college kids are like, oh, I'm so busy, but like they're waking up at 10, they're taking a nap in the middle of the day, like they're relaxed. Like you have more free time now than you'll ever have in your entire life. And that free time allowed me to build my business before I graduated college. It built the foundation for my entire business. So Gary and I actually see eye to eye on college. I hated it, and I'm very much of the belief that you do not need it to succeed. There's really no reason to drop hundreds of thousands of dollars on a degree, like if you don't want to, especially if you're not trying to become a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or something. But if someone does want to go, or if they do see value in it, then I support it, and Gary does as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you clarified that, because I probably misspoke there in the sense that I too had a ton of free time during college and probably could have spent more time, starting this up earlier, doing whatever the case may be. But like you said, if you have the ability to learn something and start your passion project on the side during that spare time, it can be an amazing opportunity. For athletes specifically, I'm curious if you have any suggestions where you would come in and be like, hey, this is the route that I saw a ton of people go through XYZ form. Like for Canadians, the big thing is going down to the States, playing NCAA. We're up in Toronto here. The dream as you're a high school student is to like get down, play NCAA, Div 1 sports, whatever your competition level is. Do you think that is a good option for athletes? Do you think they should explore other potential pro leagues, like a G League, going overseas to Europe? Maybe I'm throwing you on the spot here.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll start by saying this definitely isn't my area of expertise at all. Like I've never even heard of the G League. I don't know what the fuck that is. So this is not my area of expertise. I have a lot of friends who are athletes and competitive athletes, like at professional level sports, elite level sports, Olympians, all that. Here's the thing. I think that you shouldn't only be focused on one division or on, like, I know I have some friends who were Division 3 athletes who made it to professional, and like they've done amazing things. I think generally, especially as an athlete who's a good athlete who wants to make it your career, I think a lot of your self-worth is built around people telling you how good of an athlete you are. Right. A lot of your whole identity is like, you are an athlete, you identify as an athlete. And for probably much of your life, people have been like, oh, you're so good. You're a great athlete. You're amazing. I think it's very dangerous to have your entire self-worth be around that. And I would encourage you to find other things that you can identify with that it really bring you passion and joy. Because let's say, you're an amazing athlete, but you're defining your success based on getting into a Division 1 school or a Division 1 program, whatever it is. But you don't. It's so easy for everything around you to collapse, to make it seem like, oh, well, like this isn't work. Like I remember, and this isn't even athletic wise, but I had a friend who her entire self-worth was based around getting into a certain college, getting into a certain university. And she was unbelievably smart and she didn't get in, and she got into some other amazing universities, but she had a huge mental and emotional breakdown because she didn't get into the one that she thought was like the best. And I see athletes dealing with this as well. Like they don't get the team that they want. They don't get the university they want. They don't get the division they want. And now all of a sudden, like their entire life is falling in front of their eyes before them, like collapsing in front of them. And I think there's so many ways to achieve the same goal, whether it's in athletics, whether it's in business, whether it's in relationships. There are many ways to achieve the same goal. And there's so many opportunities. I don't want anyone to feel like they have to make a certain division or a certain team or a certain school just to be successful. Because if you do very much identify, like have your entire self-worth based around you being on a certain team or a certain division or whatever it is, if and when it doesn't happen, it's so easy to fall into this terrible train of thought that you're just not a good person, or it's very easy to have everything ruined. Whereas if it's just a part of your life rather than your whole life, it's easier to move on and continue to find passion and enjoyment through it.
Phenomenally put. I love it. One of the things that you talk about, and that is not an exception for getting to the result that you want, is a calorie deficit. It's the only way for you to get results and to lose weight. It's something you talk about in the Inner Circle, which is your online website where you have probably hundreds of thousands of individuals who you've changed their lives. Can you explain your thought process when you created the Inner Circle and what you were able to accomplish here once you got a couple people involved and on the calorie deficit train?
Yeah. So I started the Inner Circle in December of 2015. So
Okay.
I started making content in July of 2011. And from July of 2011 until December of 2015, my only revenue source from this business was one-on-one online coaching. So I was just doing one-on-one coaching. And it took
Okay.
like 2 years from 2011 to 2013 before I really started to get many paying clients. From 2011 to 2013, I didn't have that many. In 2013, it started to pick up. And then between 2013, 2015, that's when my client roster like really started to build up. So I ended up having about 70 to 80 one-on-one clients just through that, which was great. And it was amazing, but 70 to 80 one-on-one clients is a lot. It's like a lot of emails on a daily basis, a lot of programs. Like it was very overwhelming. So I realized I didn't want to be tied down to emails all day, every day. So I was like, I need to come up with a way to essentially help reach more people at a lower cost without me needing to be at my computer all day. And the Inner Circle was that. So I launched that in December of 2015. And I was petrified that it was going to fail, that it wasn't going to work. I remember like, it was like, basically in my mind, what I said was this, I was like, I need to give it one full year. So from December 2015 to December 2016, I have to try it. I have to go as hard as I can on it. And that way, because sometimes you'll try something for a month or two and then call it quits, but you didn't really give it a chance. So gave it a year. By the end of the year, it was clearly very worth it. And so that's what I did. And I went all in on that. But I was doing both the Inner Circle and one-on-one simultaneously until summer of 2017. And in the summer of 2017, I was basically like, I can't do both anymore. I need to stop. So I told my assistant at the time, I was like, hey, stop accepting one-on-one coaching inquiries. Like I can't do it anymore. Like we're just going to go full on Inner Circle. So in the summer of 2017, that's when I went 100% Inner Circle. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
Amazing. And you've impacted so many people. So kudos to you for that. One of the things that I also try and emphasize here on the Athletes Podcast is we bring on pro athletes from, whatever league it is and emphasize kind of what they're doing as their training methods. But the media often portrays these athletes and gives you a cutout workout of, bench press, squats, deadlifts, whatever, and maybe not programmed the best way and maybe not catered to the average human being or someone who's just getting into fitness. And what I did about a year and a half ago, we had the Mind Pump Media team on, Sal,
Nice.
Justin, and Adam, sorry. And I wanted to emphasize on those episodes specifically was like, hey, we need to make sure that people aren't necessarily trying to train like professional athletes because they're not pro athletes. And one of the things I wanted to bring up with you today was how should people be approaching health, wellness, nutrition, fitness when they're not looking to become LeBron James in the NBA or whatever other player in any other league? So how would you maybe, provide your insight on that as a non-pro sport individual?
Yeah. So first and foremost, the Mind Pump team is great. So I love that you had them on. They're amazing. Second, and this is really, really important, and I think a lot of athletes might get offended when I say this, but it's important. Look at it this way. LeBron, like there's a reason you say LeBron James, because he's far and away the best, right? He's in the best league for basketball in the world. He's in the NBA. And even among the best basketball players in the world, he stands above the rest as a fucking savage. Like he's just unbelievable. Like watching LeBron James it's crazy because he can make other incredible basketball players look like nothing. It's sort of like there's a saying in jiu-jitsu. There are black belts and then there are black belts, right? Where it's like, because some black belts are so good that they make black belts look like white belts when they fight them. It's just, they're so unbelievably good at jiu-jitsu that it doesn't matter that they're fighting a black belt because they look like they suck. LeBron James does that to other basketball players. And what you have to, like, you're not LeBron James. You're not LeBron James. And LeBron James I'll be frank with you. Like I've seen some of his workouts and his workouts are fucking stupid. I've seen some of the workouts that he does and they're awful. They're dangerous. Like they're not good workouts for basketball players or really for anybody. What you have to remember about some of these elite athletes is they succeed despite having bad workouts. LeBron James could be an elite athlete in probably any sport because he's just a freak athlete. And it doesn't take away his hard work. I'm not saying he doesn't work hard. That's not what I'm saying at all. He works incredibly hard, but to deny there's a genetic component of just a freak athlete is ridiculous and stupid as well. So sometimes looking at the workout that elite athletes do is not only stupid because you're not an elite athlete and like you haven't gotten to that level yet, but also because some of these elite athletes are succeeding despite having a very poor program and doing stupid exercises. They're just freaks in general. So the best way to improve your athletic performance is just the basic foundational strength and athletic qualities of everything, like just basic strength training programming. It doesn't look complex. It doesn't have to be every day. You don't have to be balancing on Bosu balls and doing all this crazy stuff. It should be very basic, simple, straightforward. I think I've worked with a lot of professional baseball players actually when I worked at Cressy Performance, and one of the best things I learned working with high level elite athletes is the job of the coach is to not injure the player. Like that's it. The best thing you can do is make sure they don't get injured. If you can increase their strength, if you can get them stronger, foundationally strong, you can improve their balance, you can improve their coordination, you can improve their mobility, which are all very basic. You don't need super high level concepts for this. Basic stuff without injuring them. That's the key to longevity in sport. That's the key to a high performing athlete. If you have an athlete that's getting injured all the time, they're not going to do well. No team's ever going to want you if you're injured all the time. And what's the best way to avoid injury? Getting stronger with basic, simple movements that don't put you at risk of injury. That's it. It's super simple, very basic. There's no reason to be trying to model your workouts off of someone who might be doing great regardless of the workouts that they do.
So true. You mentioned black belts. You're a 27th degree black belt in coffee drinking. I say that as you're drinking some Perrier, but what's the most amount of coffee you've drank in a day?
So I actually did a YouTube video on that. There's a big myth that people think that coffee dehydrates you. It's a huge myth around that. And so I got tired of showing people the research showing you that coffee doesn't actually dehydrate you. So I decided to do a YouTube video in which I only drank coffee for 24 hours. And I tested my hydration status throughout that 24 hours to show people that I didn't get dehydrated. In fact, I actually hydrated myself through drinking coffee. So throughout that 24 hours, it was super dangerous. Like I actually ended up like almost going to the hospital because I had way too much caffeine. I had well over 1,000 milligrams of caffeine that day. But yeah, I don't know how many coffees it was, but it was well over a gram of caffeine, which was just, it was awful. Ludicrous. It was actually not comfortable at all.
Yeah, that's a lot of caffeine. That's a couple of Reign energy drinks, the American style. That's a lot. Okay, so yeah, we don't suggest that here on the Athletes Podcast, but I guess hey, when duty calls, hey, it was probably a really good YouTube video. Probably got a ton of views, right?
Yeah, it did do well.
So you also talk about some exercises that aren't good for people to be doing. You have some hilarious Instagram, social media clips, content that you've been creating. I'd love for you to maybe explain like what got you or what gave you the ability to create this social media frenzy where you create content that is captivating and also extremely kind of borderline risque. I don't know how to describe it, but you create some incredible content on social media that gets shared quickly, but it also provides a message and showcases the fact that like, hey, crab walks are definitely not something you should be doing because you're probably going to tear your shoulder. So like, I'd love for you to maybe twofold explain like the social media strategy that you have and how you're going about your online strategy.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll start by saying, if you go back and look at my content from 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, you will see a very different content creator. You'll see someone who's very nervous. You go to my YouTube is really cool because you can go to a YouTube channel and you can organize their videos from their newest videos, their most popular videos, and their oldest videos. And if you go to my YouTube channel and you organize my videos from oldest to newest, you're going to see a super nervous, red in the face kid who is swaying back and forth because I was super nervous on camera. Like I've done so much. I've done so many videos. I've been doing this since 2011, right? So it's like, I've been making content every day for over a decade now. So I've gotten more comfortable with it. I've tried things. And so a lot of it's just experience, trial and error. And what I realized was there's three main types of content. So you have educational type content as one type of content. You have entertaining type of content as one type of content. And then you have a combo of the two. And so I'll say like educational type of content is what most fitness professionals do. The issue is most of them are really fucking boring. Like it's just, and they teach it in a way like you're in a classroom. And the reality is if anybody wanted to learn that way, then they would go to school for this, and they probably wouldn't need to watch your social media because they would be so interested in fitness in this way that they would spend their time researching and studying, and they wouldn't need to watch your Instagram videos. So if you're only educating and it's just all boring, like you're in a classroom, then good luck. Cause it's, you'll get some people, but not many. On the other hand, entertaining type content, most fitness professionals don't do that. I would say this is often for comedians. Like, I don't know if you know who Trey Kennedy is. He's a really good example of it. Trey Kennedy on Instagram and YouTube. He's super funny. He's all education. He's all entertainment, not education, but he's built up a huge following at that. And the entertainment value is incredible. And I found combining the two of them is where you get the best of both worlds. So I used to just do education, and it did well, but it wasn't until I started injecting more entertainment within my education that things really took off. And it started off with just me being more of myself. I didn't have any wigs or anything at the beginning. It was more just me like speaking like I speak and cussing and just like being who I am, just like actively just. I think here's a way to explain it. When you go in for a job interview, right? You go in for a job interview on day one, you're going to be acting in a certain way. You're gonna be like, oh, hey, very nice to meet you. I'm so honored to be here and I appreciate you. This is wonderful. Thank you so much. And you'll fake laugh at their jokes and you're just you're very PC, right? But let's say you get the job and 6 months in, you're on a golfing trip with them. You're like, fuck you, motherfucker. And like, piece of like, you're being yourself now and your tone has changed. You're speaking like you normally speak. And now you actually have a real relationship with them. And I think what I've realized is people are tired of the fakeness. People are tired of you pretending to be something that you're not. So what I try and do is from the very beginning, immediately, I want you to know who I am and how I act. Like I'm not going to put on a fake type of educational mask when I don't speak that way in real life. If I'm your friend, I'm going to talk to you just like I'm talking to you right now. And I think people appreciate that and they relate to it and they're sort of drawn into it. So I've built this style just by realizing I'm not going to fake anything anymore. I'll just from the very beginning be who I am, do funny voices, make funny accents, and I'll try and educate you along the way.
Do some burpees with darts in your mouth. It's pretty hilarious.
That's exactly right.
I showed my girlfriend this past weekend and she was dying at some of your videos. It was awesome. But that is the underlying aspect too. I sent her a couple directly and it's like, yo, these are actually good to learn. Like, it's not just hilarious because you're wearing a wig, have a dart in your mouth, heaving, trying to get air, sucking wind. Like that's the cool aspect. So I appreciate what you're doing there with that. I want to touch on the fact that you mentioned you've been creating content for a decade. I'm sure that at some point you've suffered from imposter syndrome. And if you haven't, maybe it's because you've been yourself from the beginning. But creating content for a decade is something that is not something that people do at all. Gary's kind of been that integral piece that's pushed that for the past while. What's it like training or working with an individual that has so much energy like Gary and that you're having to manage, hey, we got to get a workout in here maybe, but like you're running around 24/7. So you've got to get in enough calories. Like I'm trying to wrap my head around what it would be like to manage a client like that.
Yeah. So I'll quickly say, I did struggle with imposter syndrome at the beginning of making content. And that was because I wasn't being myself, because I was trying to impress people. I was trying to sound smart instead of just being who I am. I've always found that imposter syndrome comes from you pretending to be someone you're not. Whereas like, if you just are who you are, the imposter syndrome diminishes. It doesn't always necessarily go away. I think it's natural and normal to have a little bit always, but if it's taking over your being, you're probably trying to be someone you're not. So the more you are who you are and you're unapologetically you, the less you're going to have. In terms of Gary, it's a fucking brutal. It's brutal, especially pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, I mean, we were traveling more than here's the thing with Gary, it was 7 days a week for 3 years straight was the deal that we had. If he was in Hong Kong, I was in Hong Kong. If he was in LA, I was in LA. If he was in Germany, I was in Germany. If he was in Amsterdam, I was in Amsterdam. If he was in Ireland, I was in Ireland. Like, we traveled constantly. We spent more time in the airplanes and hotels than we actually did in New York City, which is where we lived. So it was insane, just a ridiculous schedule. And it was a really good example of good enough is better than not at all, right? So it's a lot of people, like, if it's not perfect, then they don't do anything, and they'll often call themselves perfectionists. Like, well, I'm a perfectionist, and if I can't do perfect, then I'm not going to do it at all. Well, that's quite frankly fucking stupid, because good enough is often better than perfect. And like, if you're just trying to be perfect all the time, perfect is the enemy of good enough, is another way of putting it. And so we improved his health, we improved his mobility, we improved his strength, we improved his body composition. And even while still traveling all over the world, even without his nutrition being perfect, you have to understand ahead of time it's not going to be perfect. And that's okay. It's not about being perfect. It's about doing the best you can with what you have, and understanding, like, if you get a win 70% of the time, you're going to keep making progress. It won't be as fast as you want, but I would rather make slower progress at 70% for years than super fast progress at 100% for a month and then stop after that because you can't keep it up.
Yeah, sustainability is something I try and emphasize so much here, because people will go on the fad diet, lose a bunch of weight for 2 months and look great and feel fantastic. And then, a couple months later, they get the rebound. And I've fallen victim to it too, right? So it's something that I appreciate the fact that you went about it in that way. And it's obviously made tremendous results. Like, he talks about the fact that he now wants to work out and knows the benefits, even though he doesn't necessarily want to do it every time. But he even references push-ups, right? Doing reps. And like, I love that analogy, because everyone knows that they can do a push-up to some degree or another. And it's whether you put in those reps is what you're going to see on the results side. But I'm curious for you, prior to the training, you were also putting in some serious powerlifting, like you mentioned at the beginning. Can you talk about your records and what that training nutrition looked like for you, for those who are in the powerlifting sport?
Yeah. So, man, so I started powerlifting really, really young, and I fell in love with it. The record that really was my claim to fame, if you want to call it that, it was my 4 times body weight deadlift. I deadlifted 530 pounds, weighing 132 pounds. So that was deadlifting 4 times body weight is something like less than 15 people have ever done in the history of the world. So that's really what was my claim to fame. That's why people started coming to me, mainly actually because a lot of athletes, and a lot of women in particular, they wanted to get stronger, but they didn't want to put on too much mass. So a lot of athletes, they want to get stronger for their sport, but maybe they're in a weight controlled sport and they don't want to add too much muscle, or even they're in a sport where they want to get stronger. They know it's important. Even something like running, they need to get stronger to decrease the risk of injury, to improve their performance, but they don't want to add too much mass because it could negatively impact their sport. Not something like baseball. Usually baseball, more mass, the better. But generally speaking, a lot of these athletes would come to me, or women would come to me, because they saw me, I'm not a huge dude, but I'm lifting more weight than dudes 2 and 3 times my size. So they're like, well, how is this possible? How is this super small guy lifting all of this weight? And so that's actually what's really kickstarted my career, was being able to be very, very strong without being a massively jacked dude.
And I'm curious now, what were some of the strategies to maintain, say, your 130 pound weight and not gain too much muscle size? What went into that?
Yeah. So when people think of strength, usually they think just about big muscles. They think you've got to be training often like a bodybuilder, where you get these big muscles. And that's not the case at all. So I'm not going to have a whole physics discussion, but we'll talk about the equation for force. Force equals mass times acceleration, right? So if we're looking at how much force you can produce, there are 2 things that massively impact it. It's mass and acceleration. Most people, when they think about producing force, about how much strength you can produce, they only think of the mass side of the equation. They only think of lifting heavier weight. That's it. And the other half of the equation that equally affects it is acceleration. It's speed. This is what everybody misses. It's what people completely overlook. And so people will try for years and years and years only lifting heavier weight, and lifting heavier weight will get you stronger. But after a certain point, you will stall. And this is a big plateau people hit, and they can't can't break it, and they're missing the acceleration side of it. So one of the major adaptations that will happen from a strength perspective is a neurological adaptation. That this is what you develop from practicing speed and acceleration work, where your brain tells your muscles to fire more quickly and more explosively. And the only way you can train this is through speed training. It's not super heavy weight. It's usually between 50 to 70% of your 1 rep max. And you train your body to lift it as quickly and explosively as possible. And when you increase the rate at which you can produce force, the acceleration side of it, well, now you're actually gonna be able to lift heavier. So they're both important. The amount of weight that you're lifting and the speed at which you're lifting are equally important. So for me, one of the ways I was sort of able to stay in my weight class and not gain too much weight is I just simply focused a lot more on the acceleration side. And I still lifted heavier, but I didn't do it to the point where I was adding too much muscle mass. And I was actually able to get significantly stronger almost solely just by really focusing on that speed side of it.
Super interesting. What does your training look like now? I'm sure you've got a ton going on. You're managing the inner circle. Like how often are you getting after it nowadays? I know you've got the gym setting up in your new place.
Yeah. So my training now is, I'll be honest, it's the best it's been since like in my entire life. When I was coaching Gary, my training was awful. I got fat, I got out of shape, my blood pressure went up, I got weak because I was traveling 7 days a week for 3 years straight and coaching Gary nonstop. That was when my fitness was the worst. But now I've been on my own for a few years now, and I live in Texas. And so I do jujitsu 5 or 6 times a week. And I do strength training about 3 times a week, and I do cardio every single day. So I'm training for a couple hours every single day. I'm doing something, and I love it. I feel really good. I work a lot, I do work a lot, but I don't work as much as I used to. And I now have more freedom to spend more time working out than I have in many, many years. So right now at jujitsu almost every single day, cardio basically every single day, and strength training about 3 times a week.
Amazing. I only ask because Jordan Syatt, who's a friend of the show, he's coming on in a couple of weeks. I posted on my Instagram any questions for yourself, and he messaged. He's like, "Does he even work out?" So I had to throw that in there and make sure you got the little nut. But for someone who's done so much over the past decade, created so much content, helped thousands of individuals, is there one moment in time or one event or one area that was like incredible, that really made a lasting impact over the past 10 years, that was like, this event that I spoke at really stuck out to me, and I had a ton of people afterwards tell me this was the best conversation they had ever listened to?
Any event in particular? So I've spoken at a lot of events, and I really do enjoy it. There's not one in particular that I was like, man, like this was it. I think it was funny. So I spoke at an event this past weekend in Austin, Texas, and I brought my wife with me, and I speak all the time, but I brought her to 2 different events. I brought her to this one, and I brought her in February of 2020, right before COVID hit the US. I took her to Ireland, and I did a speaking event there. And it's really cool when she comes, because it's one thing to see all the interactions on social media, like to look at your phone. It's another thing to actually interact with the people in person, face to face, and put a face to the name, and actually talk to these people and learn about them and meet them in real life. So I think more than having one event in particular or one topic, it's more just like, I love actually meeting these people and seeing how like the effects of social media, and so much of what we hear about is how social media is negative. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of negative aspects of social media, but there's also so many positives. There's like this conversation right now wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for social media. So I think it really does an amazing job of bringing people together and being able to connect with people and enjoy people and learn new things and experience new things. And so I think the best part for me is just being able to share that with people and to meet them.
Yeah, it's amazing how you're able to keep your personal life private. Like, you don't talk about your wife much ever on social media, except that she's an underwater basket weaver or whatever her job is at that week. But you also do share a ton about your BJJ and the work you do there. Can you maybe highlight how that helps you with life in general and coping it, and how, you manage stress through sport or activity?
Yeah. So it's funny. One of my first jiu-jitsu coaches said something to me that really stuck. He said, when you start your day trying to prevent someone from choking you out, every other obstacle you face that day seems relatively insignificant. And that's held true for me I've been doing jiu-jitsu for several years now, and I get my ass kicked every day. I get choked out every day. And basically when I walk out of there, I haven't died yet. So everything else I do that day is relatively easy. Like I didn't die. So like I feel pretty good. And it definitely puts things in perspective, whether, who knows, maybe you'll lose some clients, or a post doesn't go the way I want, or I'm struggling with whatever it is I'm struggling with that day. At least I didn't die, So it's like, for me, that's one of the best parts. And jiu-jitsu specifically, I've played many sports. I've wrestled, I did baseball, I did soccer at a pretty high level. I've done a lot of sports. I'm very lucky to be a pretty athletic guy. Jiu-jitsu is without question the most difficult, like by a landslide. And those are just the sports I've done on teams. But I've played lacrosse, I've done hockey, like I've played all these just recreationally as well. So I've tried a lot of sports. Jiu-jitsu, the skill level is unbelievable. Like it's like playing 3-dimensional chess. Like it's like playing 10 different games of 3-dimensional chess at the same time. It's unbelievable. And it's super fun. It's challenging. It's humbling. So for me, I think one of the great things about it for me is it keeps me humble. It's funny. I think a lot of people who are always looking for fights don't know how to fight. And a lot of people who are like, have all this bravado and are like always trying to get in fights with people, they have no clue what would happen to them if they actually met someone who did know how to fight. And for me, it's been so great because I know for a fact, like I go against some amazing, like there's a girl at my gym. There's a young girl. Her name's Vanessa. She's 15. She's 105 pounds, and she is a savage killer. Like, God forbid anybody tries to fuck with this girl. Like, she doesn't look like she'd be a killer. Like, a lot of these bodybuilders or weightlifters who lift hundreds of pounds, Vanessa can't do that, but she will choke you the fuck out. I'm not joking. Like, this girl is a beast. And it's because so much of fighting has so little to do with strength and so much to do with just the skill of fighting. People really don't understand fighting is a skill in and of itself. It's a skill that you have to develop, just like swinging a baseball bat, just like tackling someone in football, whatever. It's their skills. And for me, it's so good to know that I could get my ass kicked by so many people, because like I have no interest in fighting people. Like, God forbid I need to. Like, I feel very confident in my ability to defend myself or my wife. Like, I have no issue if I need to on the street. But one of the things about going into a professional jiu-jitsu academy and fighting people every day is like, it's the last thing you want to do, because you don't know who you're going against. You don't know what they know. You don't know like how dangerous they are. And so it's like, ironically, it encourages you to avoid fighting and to avoid danger. So anytime I see someone who's really trying to fight, I'm always like, all right, let's go. Like, let's see if you're about this life.
Yeah. Probably a scary thing. They'll regret that decision a couple minutes afterwards. I know you addressed this earlier on your Instagram story, but I'd love to share, because you've, dropped a couple F-bombs during this conversation. How do you manage and I guess it goes back to you just being yourself, but like the cursing? It's something that, some people don't love. The older generation in specific doesn't love that on social media or whatever. I'd love for you to maybe just touch on that. We're an athletic podcast, but like athletes have to deal with this when they're putting their brand out there, trying to, establish who they are as an individual. And you have a pretty good case to be made for why you are who you are and say the things that you do. So I'd love for you to share your thoughts there.
Yeah. So there's a lot, right? So the number one is, I'll tell a quick story. When I first made my website in 2011, I put on the homepage of my website, I don't remember verbatim what it was, but something to the effect of, I don't give a fuck what you think. I'm just going to tell you the truth. No bullshit. Something like that. So
Yeah.
2 swears in the same sentence, right on the homepage. And my mom was pissed. And she was like, Jordan, no one's going to want to work with you if you swear. It's da, da, da. And I was like, Mom, if someone doesn't want to work with me because I swear, then I don't want to work with them. And I think that like is something that actually drew people to me. Now I get people telling me every day, I wish you didn't swear, da, 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 da. And maybe I'd be able to make more money if I didn't swear. But the reality is, for every person who says they unfollow me because I swear, there's someone else who says, I follow you because you do swear. I love that you swear. It makes you more real. I enjoy it. So the reality is that there's a famous quote that goes, if you try and please everybody, you're going to please nobody. So be yourself. Be yourself. The other thing, and this is really important for athletes, I am beholden to nobody. I have no sponsors. I have nobody that's like nobody is going to threaten my income by saying, well, we're going to pull this sponsorship from you because you're swearing. Like I don't do that at all. I don't have any sponsors. I know athletes might be different, but you can find a sponsor who's okay with you being you, especially nowadays. It's very different than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. You can find sponsors now who will they appreciate you for you being you, and do not accept a sponsorship from someone who says, well, you can't say this and you can't talk about this. You can't talk about this. Be upfront and say, listen, I am who I am, and I'm going to say what I want to say, and I'm going to talk about what I want to talk about. If you don't like that, don't sponsor me now. Like, don't do it. Like, because I'm going to say what I want, and I don't want you trying to threaten me by taking away the sponsorship, because I am who I am. And there's nothing worse than you not being able to be who you are just so you can make a bag. Like, that's not a good idea. It's not a good life practice. Don't take money if it comes at the expense of you being able to be yourself. It's a terrible idea. You're literally losing freedom. You think you're gaining it by getting more money, but you're going to be losing it, and you're going to lose more money long run. If you are who you are, you will find sponsors who will accept you for you no matter what, I promise.
Wise words. Anything else you would go back and tell your 21-year-old self when you started your website in your college dorm room?
If I could go, so I'm almost 31. And if I could go back and tell my younger self something, it would to be, you're young as shit. So be patient, which I was, but I would say the thing is, stop being so cocky. I was very cocky. I was very arrogant. I was very much like, I know everything. And I think if I told myself that, I probably would have brushed it off and said, no, I'm not. But like, it's very easy for younger athletes, especially if you're really good at your sport and you have a lot of attention from people, and a lot of people are like, oh, you're great at this, you're great at that. It's very easy to be arrogant and to be cocky. Don't be a dick. Don't treat everyone with respect. Be kind to everybody, and don't put yourself on too much of a pedestal, because if you fall off, it's a long way down. So that's probably what I would tell myself when I was younger.
Love it. I wrap up every episode of the Athletes Podcast by asking our guests what their biggest piece of advice for the next generation of athletes would be. And you kind of touched on it there specifically for your 21-year-old self, but anything else that we didn't touch on today that you think of as imperative for an athlete who's going through high school, college, that really could use that extra little gumption or piece of advice from you?
I think the next thing that I would say, and this is equally, if not more important, is something my mom said to me when I was a kid a lot. Was she was like, you're only a kid once, and you spend the rest of your life as an adult, and you'll never get those years back. So enjoy it. And I think it's very easy as a young athlete to be looking at thinking about the rest of your life. I want to make this team. I want to make that team. I want to make this division. I want to make that division. Always thinking about when you get older, you're going to have this. And you're spending your whole youth thinking about what's going to happen when you're older, and you miss out on your youth. And I want you to have fun. You will never be the age you are today ever again. And if you're 16, 17, 18, 20, 22, you're young as shit. I don't care how old you feel. You're not old. I'm 31 and I'm a baby. I'm still super young. But you will never be this young ever again. You will never have this much freedom ever again, ever. So enjoy it. Have fun with your teammates. Enjoy the process. Laugh. Stop taking yourself so seriously. Just have fun with it, because it's so easy to overlook that.
What a great way to end it. Jordan Syatt, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's an honor, honestly. I can't thank you enough for coming on. I look forward to staying in touch. Hopefully have you on in a couple of years when you're even more famous and have chugged more coffee and are doing more fun videos. But again, really appreciate your time. Hope you have a great rest of your day, man. Thank you, folks, for tuning into the 122nd episode of the Athletes Podcast featuring Jordan Syatt. What an interview that was. Love just how real and raw he is, and appreciate his honesty and the fact that he's been sharing his stuff for over a decade, and can't wait to have more conversations with him in the future. Would love it for you folks to drop a comment regarding your favorite part of the show. Makes us produce better content in the future. And hit that like button, subscribe, wherever you're consuming the Athletes Podcast content. We really appreciate it. It means the world to us. 122 in and so many more to go. Thanks again for tuning in. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.